Good afternoon. We're here at the Seattle Antiquarian Book Fair. The date is Sunday, October 12th, 2008, and I'm speaking with David Gregor, bookseller from Langley, Washington, formerly of Seattle, Washington, whom I've known personally for about 30-odd years. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
David is also the co-chair of this great book fair where we are today, the Seattle Antiquarian Book Fair. David, tell us a little bit about your background, your family, where you were born, things like that.
Well, I was born in Everett, Washington, and then grew up in Bremerton, Washington, which is just across the water from Seattle. I spent most of my youth there, and then Uncle Sam got me for a few years in the late 60s. Came back and went to the University of Washington, took my degree in journalism, and wrote journalism for several years, but realized that I didn't want to continue to do that, but I wanted to continue to write in a more permanent framework, something other than just newspaper work.
You worked for a local newspaper?
No, actually, I got all of my newspaper work done while I was at the U, writing for the Daily. Wrote every day, arts and entertainment. Got 2 years of that in and realized I didn't want any more of the newspaper, but I wanted to continue to write. So upon graduation, I moved to Los Angeles and began a freelance career there. And while I was freelancing, I realized that I really wanted to do something a little bit more permanent, writing-wise, in terms of literature, fiction, something. So I went to the UCLA Writers Program for 2 years and began my first novel there, which was published in 1992, called In Different Times. And but I moved from Los Angeles. I was only there for about 2.5 years. And then I moved to Spain, lived in Spain for 6 months, which is really where I started the novel. And then I moved back to Seattle.
When was that?
When was that? 1980. I moved back to Seattle. And I was still working on that novel, and I was working at a small mom-and-pop grocery store in downtown Seattle in the bottom of the Grosvenor House on 5th Avenue in Seattle. But prior to that is when I first met Taylor in the late 70s, prowling through the secondhand bookstores, and then Taylor had just opened up his shop up on Pike Street. And Taylor was my first true encounter with an antiquarian bookseller, and gave me my first directions in terms of collecting books, even though at the time I wasn't considering myself a collector. The books I was interested in were things that I quickly found were out of print and were directed towards secondhand bookstores. And Taylor's shop was one of the first that I went into, and Taylor gave me some good directions as to paying attention to condition of books, completeness of books with the jackets versus those without jackets. And that stuck with me forever.
The great collectors become collectors before they realize they have become collectors.
That's very true. Sometimes we've got the virus and don't even know it. And so from then on, I took to heart whatever I'd picked up from Taylor. And
we should note that when you were working at the small grocery store in the Denny Regrade area of Seattle, my little bookshop at that time was about a half block away. So
when you moved, yes, you moved right across.
Quite often then.
And again, we sort of kept in contact. And I was a man of minimal means at the time, still trying to get that first book done. And there were books that I wanted dearly that Taylor had, and they were not necessarily expensive books, but they were books I wanted, and Taylor was the first person to say, you take the book and you pay me when you can. And that was really my first encounter with sort of the underlying integrity of the book trade, that somebody would trust me to be good with a book and with payment. And I never forgot that. And then subsequently, I came in contact with other Seattle area booksellers who similarly passed on very interesting tidbits of not only information, but their courtesy. And I became very enamored with the book trade, though at the time I wasn't inclined to be a bookseller or anything. And by the time I'd finished my first book, I just turned 40, and I realized I couldn't continue working in this mom and pop grocery store for any longer. I mean, I was done, and I needed to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And the person I was working for, because I was basically searching for books for customers in the grocery store. They found out that I could find books for them.
I can recall you coming in and asking for things for other people.
People would come in and say, I understand that you'll find a book for somebody. And I'd say, sure. And they'd say, well, I'm looking just for a nice hardcover copy of Moby Dick. I said, I'll see what I can do for you. And, that I'd run into town real quick or go to Taylor's or one of the other shops on my lunch break, and I'd find one for $8. I'd come back and I'd say, I found you one that's only $12. They said, gosh, great. Here's a list of all the books that I'm really looking for. Next thing you know, I was selling more books out of the grocery store than I was selling groceries. But when I finished my book, that's when the fellow I was working for, he says, you ought to open up a bookstore. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. That'd be the last thing in the world I'd want to do, because I had another book in mind. But it sunk in, and I thought, gosh, it's the one thing I know the most about is books, based on what other booksellers had taught me and showed me and sort of brought me along. And it's to the local booksellers, as opposed to, say, international names. It's those local booksellers that I owe most everything that I learned early on about the trade, how it works, the courtesies that are given to customers and to other booksellers. I learned a lot about all of that even before I became a bookseller.
When did you start your business?
I opened in January of 1987. I took to heart what this fellow had said, that maybe I should think about a bookstore, and I did think about it. I went around and asked every bookseller I knew, can a guy make a living selling books? I asked one Seattle bookseller, I said, I don't want to pry into your life, trust me, but I just want to know, can you tell me how much money you make? And at the time he says, I made about $15,000 this year. And I says, gosh, that seems like a lot of money selling books. And I says, so you can really do that? And he says, yeah. And that's when the seed was planted. And in June of 1987, I opened my shop in West Seattle, just called Gregor Books at the time. And I was there for 17 years until I moved from West Seattle to Langley, Washington.
And you still operate an open shop?
I still operate an open shop in Langley and wouldn't have it any other way. Open shops are very, very important.
A place where people can go and handle the books.
Handle the books,
not think
talk.
of them as abstract things on a computer screen.
Exactly. Right? It's critically important for people to be able to see the material, handle it, smell it, ask questions about it, and have somebody give them a cogent answer, bring them along. That's where we get our customers from.
Well, here it is. You've had your own business for 21 years, so you've seen a lot of changes in this trade. What are some of the more important, profound changes you've seen in our trade?
Two major ones. Well, obviously, one is the internet, and the second is a result of the internet, the closing of the open shops. Those two things have, I think, altered the book trade and book selling dramatically. And there's both good, positive things out of the internet, and with it comes some negatives. But I think all in all, it's what we have, and but it has altered it for sure.
How easy was it for you to enter the world of the internet and incorporate that into your own business?
It wasn't that difficult. It really wasn't. I was paying attention. I was issuing catalogs from day one. Back when the AB Bookman's Monthly was in operate, I was quoting books and buying books from that source. And I started to see, as soon as computers came around, and you started seeing people using them to create a database or just maintain a mailing list. And that's basically what I did. I just had a computer to maintain a mailing list so I could get catalogs and lists out on a regular basis. But then when Dick Weatherford came along with his programs, and the buzz was the computers and databases are going to be what's happening, and I followed them and paid attention and asked a lot of questions, knew Dick and spoke with him numerous times about things.
You should know this is the Interlock company, one of the first of the online book matching sites, which have since then become kind of ubiquitous, but it was quite revolutionary. What year would that have been, David?
Oh boy, I want to say
1991, maybe?
he could have been the early to mid 90s, yeah. Because I think Abe books came along in 96 or 7. But yeah, it wasn't a hard transition. I was cautious. I didn't want to jump into something if it was going to fade away in 6 months. But so I waited to see how things were starting to unfold. And once I saw that, yes, this is a good tool, I wasted no time, signing on. And it's not been a hard transition.
We have a dinner for 1 o'clock.
Something that was generally a positive for you rather than a negative.
It was, because where I was located in West Seattle was off the beaten track, and I was a destination eventually. Once I transitioned my business from a more general secondhand bookstore to a specialist dealer in collectible material, I relied on it as an adjunct to the through the door traffic.
What would you say to someone who would want to enter the rare book trade today?
I would say spend as much time as you can around other booksellers. If you can, get a job working for one, even if it's for no pay, even if it's just 1 day a week where you're working in the shipping room, being around the counter, watching how buys are made. I mean, that's the important stuff. What the process is and what the protocol is and the code of conduct, and you understand that. That's the thing that's missing today. So many people that are jumping into the trade via online activities without any interim steps of learning how the trade works. I would suggest any way you can do that.
Can there be any substitute for handling and seeing a lot of books?
The more books you handle and see, and pricing processes you see, how a bookseller grades a book and prices it $100 as opposed to $500 is critical. You have to have that. And in the old school, people would work for a bookseller for many years until they learned the trade, and then they'd say, I think I'm ready to launch my own business. But today we have that misstep. And also, I think it's important that booksellers know about business, because we are business people. And there are so many aspects of that, customer service, maintaining an image, creating an image, and how do you keep it going, are important. And a lot of people just bypass that, think if I've got a book, I put it online, I could sell the book. And it's not that easy.
No.
You need to have a good foundation in just the basics of a business operation. In addition to, now you need to know your stock and trade. And those two things are, to my mind, critical.
You wear several different hats. You're a published writer of novels, short stories also.
I have, yes.
You own your own book business,
I do.
Gregor Books in Langley, Washington. And today we're here at the Seattle Antiquarian Book Fair, which you are the co-director of. You've also taught classes on book collecting. So I'd like to kind of talk about some of those things. How did you find yourself in the business of promoting a book fair here in Seattle, which by now you've been doing for what?
This is our 11th year.
11th
as
year.
Partners, yeah. Well, it's I know it's staggering, isn't it? I mean, when I first came in the business, that first year in 1987, it was in June that I opened up, and there was a book fair that year, and I couldn't wait to sign up that fall. I wanted to be a part of the book fair. And after my first book fair, I was like, I had the bug. I said, can't we do this every weekend? This is so much fun.
Oh.
And to my knowledge, my surprise at the time was that, oh no, it's only happening every other year. And I said, I can't wait 2 years for this. And but I did for the next one. And then when Jim Todd, who was promoting the book fair for a couple of years, relinquished and said he didn't want to do it anymore. My now partner Lewis Collins and I and one other person said, well, we'll do it, and so we put together a business and decided to do it.
Jim Todd at that time was the owner-manager of the Shorey bookstore here in Seattle.
Which you worked for.
I never worked for
Oh, you never
Shorey's.
did? I thought you did.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, I've been misinformed.
My record is clean.
But it was at that point where I realized, and I just sort of saw things that could be done differently. I was a strong proponent that, a yearly book fair would be best. And maintaining a customer list that's active and current.
I should interject that I was co-chair of a couple of Seattle book fairs in the early 80s.
Yes, you
and
were.
we were all, at that time, too timid to consider the idea of a yearly fair. And it was you and Lewis who made the move to make this a yearly event and one of the great continuing successes in the book fair world.
You know, this is a great area for book fairs. They've always been very well attended and successful, and I just couldn't see that we couldn't sustain one every year. And you know, Lewis and I have worked very hard at applying good business sense to it and consistency. That was the thing. That was, you know, it wasn't anybody's fault before. It was just that there wasn't any kind of consistent flow, and so we brought that to it.
So even with the internet having changed so many things in the book trade, you still see a role in the future for the book fair.
I was talking to somebody last night, and I said, you know, the book fairs today are what used bookstores, open shops, have been traditionally for the book trade, how important they are. And I think that's the truth. And especially the Seattle Book Fair, I mean, we've had incredible luck and success in keeping that quality and the attendance as a place to come and learn, to buy, to sell, to commiserate with your colleagues. They're extremely important. It's the single best place you can go whenever that book fair is going and see the best material that's available.
Again, it's that hands-on quality.
Hands-on, you can see it. Again, you can talk to people. You can ask them, how is it that you graded this book this way? Can you explain to me why this is not fine? And why is this book priced at $3,000? What's special about it? And they'll tell you the history. I mean, a good bookseller will know the place of that particular material in the history of that subject area, and why this particular illustrator is important to this book, and where it fits in their canon of work. And maybe it's extremely uncommon. Maybe it's a rare off-print or something like that. You're not going to find that just by searching on some database site.
Again, frequently we're talking about a personal relationship between you and your customer, you and other booksellers, a very personal business.
You bet. This is more personal than most any other business. You have to have that rapport, that sense of trust, the sense that they you know what you're talking about, and they feel comfortable doing business with you.
Tell us a little about your book collecting classes, which you've been teaching for some time.
Well, I started it in the book collecting class in 1991, doing it through the Experimental College at the University of Washington. And I had, honestly, I remember you had, Taylor, had done some similar classes in your shop. And I remember hearing about them, people talking about them. I thought, what a wonderful idea. And then I was talking to a friend of mine who was a magician. And he said, I'm going to teach a class of magic up at the Experimental College. And I said, wow, that sounds so fun. What could I do? That seems like a fun thing to do. And the one thing I knew about was books and collecting. And I thought, gosh, nobody's really doing it again on a consistent basis. And I thought, well, let me see if I could put something together. And as I tell people that take the class, I said I spend a lot of time at secondhand bookstores. And sometimes you'll find things that are mismarked, something marked as a first edition, when in fact it's the third printing of the first edition. And after I've been chased around the room with a hard metal object several times, I realized maybe this is not the answer once you bring this to the attention of the bookseller who's got this book mismarked and mispriced. So I said, maybe you go to the consumer and you inform them so that they can better
make their own
decisions.
Educated decisions.
And so I did do that. I put together a program, and I did it the first time in September of 1991, and I had 50 people show up. And many of them turned out to be future booksellers. They wanted to, there was this pent-up need.
Do you recall some of the names?
Well, the Fortners, Bob and Nancy Fortner were one. Gosh, they're the ones that immediately come to mind. But subsequently, I mean, there have been, there was a fellow that started a shop in West Seattle. He came to the program. There were just a lot of people that were just curious about this stuff. And I realized then that there were people out there who wanted, even in a passing way, to know something more about it. And it was like a curtain that you could open up and let them peek behind and see what this was about. And some continued on. Some fell by the wayside. I said, well, I know what I want needed to know, and I'm not curious anymore. But and over the ensuing years, there's been probably more than 3,000 people that I've processed through the various classes.
We should note that this has occasionally become a road show, and you've conducted these classes, often one-day seminars.
Yes, they're always one day. Yeah.
One day in other cities. Where are some of the other places?
Oh, I've done them in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Denver, Phoenix, Atlanta, Northampton, Boston, the Twin Cities. I've done them all over. And I'm looking now to find another mechanism by which to continue to do this. And we'll see what unfolds with it. But that's an important part of what I think booksellers need to incorporate in their business model. Because if we're not bringing new, informed people into this activity, we're all doomed to have an ever-shrinking pool of clients.
You and I and the other people we're speaking with today are all members of the Antiquarian Booksellers Association of America. It's the repository of these interviews. This is a professional organization that's been around for about 60 years. You've been a member for some time. What do you see as the future of the ABAA, and how would you see it in terms of the future of the book trade itself?
Well, I think the ABA is an important group of people. I mean, it's the best of the best. The most informed, and people with the best material to offer. And I think it's incumbent on us holding that place in the trade to set the agenda, to set the scales high, to be informative, to be educators, in addition to being good, solid business people. I think that's the role of the ABA, is to draw out the best of the booksellers who may not be members yet, to bring them along, school them, and get them into that organization. So not just so that they can do an expensive book fair, but so that they can go on and inform new people. Because we're the teachers. We are. Despite what many of our members think, we are the teachers. And that's one of our major roles, I think.
You and I are both great believers in the open shop as a community resource, as a source of education. What can we do to reverse the decline in open bookshops, if anything?
Well, I think the days of the big general shop are way behind us. What we're looking at now are probably more specialized, targeted booksellers with more specialized material. And I think those kinds of businesses will continue to attract customers in those areas. It doesn't mean that you can only do one or two things. It means you can do as many things as you like, but we're just not going to be covering 100 different subject areas poorly. Right. You might scale down a little bit. Mentioned that I moved to Langley, Washington, which is a destination. I think destinations are important, and finding that the old adage of location. As you realized when you opened your shop in Pioneer Square, being right next to a big new bookstore, just because it got a lot of foot traffic didn't mean it helped yours.
Did not.
It did not. And so it's not just the volume that you get, it has to be sort of the right dynamic, the right demographic of customers. So I would like to see more groupings of bookstores, open shops in those places that are desirable to visit.
Something akin to what we have here in Seattle along Stone Way with several booksellers.
You bet, exactly.
Like our own kind of modern booksellers row.
Exactly. And that's, we used to be able to find inexpensive areas of town where you could do that, but in major cities, those inexpensive parts of town are shrinking.
Tough.
But in San Francisco, there was 49 Geary upstairs in a business park kind of thing. And
even there with San Francisco real estate, there's only 2 people left there.
Exactly. Now. So it was a great idea because they had several booksellers in one location doing different things. And I think that model is something that can be applied in various different ways.
Right. If not in downtown San Francisco or Seattle.
Exactly.
Right.
No, but if let's say it was Monterey. Monterey's an attractive place to go to. People would want to go there to vacation, spend a couple of days. And if you're book oriented, and if you had a half a dozen bookstores there, boy, what a boon!
That would be a destination. Like you
Which
say.
is what we're trying to do in Langley. Now that we have 3 good booksellers, and we could always use another.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind. Do you see yourself retiring from the book trade?
They'll peel me off my chair and out of my desk with a book in hand, still cataloging it. No.
So far.
No, this is retirement. I mean, I can't think of anything I'd much rather be doing. No, this is it.
You're great at it.
Well, we work hard and constantly try and learn new things.
You're an engaging teacher, too, in more ways than one.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, David, for joining us today.
You betcha. My pleasure.